I'd warned him about his caloric temperament and excessive mental strain. The heart gives out, simple as that. But several details didn't align with this tidy diagnosis. The Colonel's dinner tray, brought to the study at 8 the previous evening, sat on a side table with the food barely touched. A cup of coffee, long since gone cold, showed a peculiar residue at the bottom, a fine sediment that glittered faintly in the lamplight. The Colonel's final letter, addressed to his attorney in Mobile, remained unfinished, mid-sentence.
I have made certain arrangements regarding the future of my daughters, which must be executed precisely as stipulated, for their own protection and for the preservation of my life's work. Should any person attempt to... The sentence ended there, the pen trailing off the page as if his hand had suddenly lost strength. Sarah and Catherine stood together in the hallway outside their father's study, wearing matching black mourning dresses that they'd somehow procured despite having no prior knowledge of his death. Their faces showed no tears, no evidence of shock or grief. They held hands, fingers interlaced, and watched the proceedings with identical expressions of watchful calm. "We should examine him more thoroughly," suggested Mr. Harold Breenidge, a neighboring planter who'd arrived to pay his respects.
Nathaniel was in good health last month when I saw him at the courthouse. This seems rather sudden. The Colonel worked himself into the grave, Dr. Grayfield snapped, irritated at having his professional judgment questioned. I've seen it 100 times. The body simply gives out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with the daughters about funeral arrangements. But Dr. Grayfield never got that conversation. Sarah addressed him first, her voice perfectly modulated and cold as January rain.
I have made certain arrangements regarding the future of my daughters, which must be executed precisely as stipulated, for their own protection and for the preservation of my life's work. Should any person attempt to... The sentence ended there, the pen trailing off the page as if his hand had suddenly lost strength. Sarah and Catherine stood together in the hallway outside their father's study, wearing matching black mourning dresses that they'd somehow procured despite having no prior knowledge of his death. Their faces showed no tears, no evidence of shock or grief. They held hands, fingers interlaced, and watched the proceedings with identical expressions of watchful calm. "We should examine him more thoroughly," suggested Mr. Harold Breenidge, a neighboring planter who'd arrived to pay his respects.
Dr. Grayfield, we appreciate your prompt attendance. The funeral will be held 3 days hence, with burial in the family plot. Mr. Jeremiah Osgood, our father's attorney from Mobile, has been summoned and should arrive by tomorrow evening. Until such time as the will is read and the estate settled, Catherine and I will manage the plantation affairs. Pritchett will continue as overseer under our direct supervision. The men in the room exchanged glances. Women didn't manage plantations. Certainly not unmarried women, barely 22 years old. And there was something else, something they couldn't quite articulate.
A sense that Sarah and Catherine had been waiting for this moment, that they'd rehearsed these words and knew exactly how events would unfold. "Now, Miss Sarah," Mr. Breenidge began in the patronizing tone men reserved for women discussing matters beyond their comprehension, "you can't seriously expect to—" "Our father educated us specifically for this eventuality," Catherine interrupted, her voice a mirror of her sister's. "We understand crop rotation, market factors, the management of field labor. We've studied his methods for years. This plantation will continue to operate at its current level of productivity."
Before we continue with the story of the Sutton sisters and the secrets that consumed an entire community, make sure you're subscribed to Echoes of the Past and hit that notification bell. We uncover the darkest corners of American history that textbooks won't touch. What the men didn't know, couldn't know, was that Sarah and Catherine had prepared for this day for months. They'd studied their father's account books, memorized the names and capabilities of every enslaved person on the property, learned which merchants in Hanville could be manipulated and which needed to be avoided. They'd planned for every contingency except one, the specific contents of their father's will. The funeral took place on February 6th under gray skies that threatened to rain but never delivered. 43 neighbors and business associates attended,
gathering in the parlor where the colonel's body lay in a walnut casket lined with white satin. The Reverend Samuel Yates from Hanville's Presbyterian Church delivered a eulogy that praised the colonel's contributions to Alabama's agricultural prosperity and his devotion to advancing scientific knowledge.
Not one enslaved person from Bell River attended the service, though they gathered in the quarters that evening for their own ceremony, a mixture of Christian hymns and older traditions, singing songs that celebrated liberation and the settling of accounts. They kept their voices low, but the sound carried across the fields to where Sarah and Catherine sat on the main house veranda. "They think they're free now," Sarah said softly. "They'll learn differently," Catherine replied. Jeremiah Osgood arrived from Mobile the evening after the funeral, a portly man of 50 with silver hair and the careful manner of someone accustomed to delivering bad news to people who could afford to make his life difficult. He carried a leather satchel containing Colonel Sutton's will and several sealed documents marked for the twins' eyes only. The reading took place in the colonel's study, now thoroughly cleaned of any evidence of his final hours. Sarah and Catherine sat together on a settee, their black morning dresses rustling slightly as they adjusted their positions. Pritchett stood by the door, uninvited but tolerated, his weathered face expressionless. Osgood opened his satchel and withdrew a thick document bound with black ribbon. Colonel Sutton revised his will on December 12, 1846, less than 2 months before his death. The provisions are unconventional. The document's opening paragraphs were standard charitable bequests to the Presbyterian Church, personal items distributed to various acquaintances.
Then Osgood reached the section concerning the plantation and its inhabitants. "To my daughters Sarah and Catherine Sutton, I leave the entirety of Bell River Plantation, including all lands, structures, livestock, equipment, and human property, to be held jointly and equally between them. However, this bequest is conditional upon the following stipulations, which must be satisfied within 24 months of my death." Osgood paused, cleared his throat uncomfortably, and continued. "First, both daughters must enter into lawful Christian marriage with men of suitable character and standing approved by the executor of this estate. Second, both marriages must produce legitimate offspring within the stipulated time frame.
Third, the daughters must maintain the plantation at current levels of productivity and demonstrate sound management of its resources." Sarah's hand tightened on Catherine's, their knuckles going white. "Should these conditions not be met," Osgood read, his voice dropping lower, "Bell River Plantation and all its assets shall be sold at public auction, with proceeds distributed equally among the following charitable institutions." The list included agricultural colleges, medical societies, and organizations dedicated to the advancement of scientific understanding of human populations. The colonel's final attempt to ensure his ideology outlived him. "There's more,"
Osgood said, withdrawing a second document. "A private letter to you both." He handed the sealed envelope to Sarah, who broke the wax seal with her thumbnail. Inside, their father's handwriting covered 3 pages of heavy cotton paper. Catherine leaned close, and they read together in silence. The letter explained the colonel's reasoning with chilling clarity. He'd observed their unnatural attachment to each other, their rejection of normal feminine interests in courtship and marriage. He'd concluded that they would never voluntarily separate, never form appropriate alliances with men who could continue his work and properly manage his estate.
So he'd created a situation where they had no choice: marry and procreate or lose everything. But the letter's final paragraph contained something more disturbing. "I have made arrangements to ensure you choose wisely. My network of correspondence extends throughout the state and beyond. They will be watching, reporting back on your conduct and your choices. Remember always that you are what I made you, and you cannot escape the fundamental truth of your nature, no matter how you might pretend otherwise. The blood that flows through your veins is both your privilege and your prison." Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. When she looked up at Osgood, her expression betrayed nothing. "We understand the terms."
Before we continue, the next chapter of this story is already live and waiting for you in our playlist. If you want to know what happened next, who survived, and what secrets were still buried in the ashes,
Go to the Echoes of the Past playlist now. The next part is ready for you immediately. Subscribe, follow the playlist, and continue the journey into history's darkest truths.